When a billionaire's heart monitor starts screaming at 2 a.m., it's never just about the heart. The fluorescent lights of St. Augustine Medical Center's emergency wing cast everything in that familiar hospital pallor, the kind that makes secrets look like shadows and shadows look like lies. A silver locket swayed gently against scrubs that had seen too many double shifts, catching the light as steady hands moved with practiced efficiency through the chaos of another Seattle midnight. The attending physician's voice cut through the ambient noise of monitors and whispered conversations. Room 314 just called for immediate cardiac assessment. VIP patient, chest pains, possible MI. Maya Santos didn't look up from the medication cart she was restocking. 6 years as a night shift nurse had taught her that VIP meant complications beyond the medical kind. Rich patients brought lawyers, media attention, and hospital administrators who suddenly remembered your name. Never a good combination at 2 a.m. Maya. Dr. Reeves appeared beside her, his expression carrying that particular tension reserved for cases that could make or break careers. I need you on this one. Patient specifically requested our most experienced cardiac nurse. She paused, one hand instinctively moving to the small silver pendant at her throat, a habit she'd developed since her mother Helena's death 6 years ago. The locket felt warm against her fingertips, a comfort she couldn't quite explain but desperately needed during the hardest shifts. Who's the patient? Nicholas Ward. The name hit the emergency department like a stone dropped in still water. Conversations paused, heads turned. Nicholas Ward, CEO of Ward Industries, the man whose charitable donations had funded the hospital's new cardiac wing, whose face appeared on magazine covers between photos of tech moguls and movie stars. The kind of billionaire who collected hospitals like other people collected art. Maya's fingers tightened around her locket. Something cold settled in her stomach. Not fear exactly, but recognition. The same feeling she'd had the day they told her about Helena's sudden collapse in the hospital's records room. The feeling that comes when the universe decides to rearrange itself around you, whether you're ready or not. Room 314 was quieter than she'd expected. No crowd of executives, no security detail, just a man in his 50s lying in the narrow hospital bed, his usually commanding presence diminished by the standard-issue gown and the network of monitoring wires attached to his chest. His dark hair was disheveled, and perspiration beaded along his forehead despite the room's controlled temperature. "Mr. Ward, I'm Maya, your cardiac nurse for tonight." She moved with professional efficiency, checking the IV line and noting the rhythm on his monitor. "Can you describe your chest pain for me?" Nicholas Ward looked up at her, and for a moment, his composed businessman facade cracked entirely. His eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her step back involuntarily, but his gaze wasn't focused on her face. It was fixed on the silver locket at her throat. The heart monitor's steady beeping suddenly accelerated. His voice came out as barely more than a whisper. His right hand moved instinctively toward his chest, but stopped halfway, trembling slightly. "That necklace, where did you get that necklace?" Maya's hand moved protectively to the locket. "It was my mother's." "Why?" The beeping accelerated further. Ward's breathing became shallow, rapid, but this wasn't cardiac distress. This was something else entirely. Recognition, shock, fear. "Your mother," he repeated slowly, as if testing the weight of the words. "What was her name?" "Helena Santos." Maya kept her voice steady, professional, even as something deep in her chest began to churn. "She worked here actually, in medical records." The monitor alarm began to sound. Ward's heart rate had spiked to 140 BPM, but when Maya looked at his face, she saw something that made her blood run cold. It wasn't pain in his expression, it was grief. Raw, overwhelming grief mixed with something that looked terrifyingly like recognition. "My wife," he whispered, his eyes never leaving the locket. "My wife had one exactly like that. Exactly like that." Before Maya could respond, the room filled with people. Dr. Reeves rushed in, followed by 2 other nurses and someone Maya didn't recognize, a tall, thin man in an expensive suit who moved with the predatory grace of a corporate lawyer. "Mr. Ward, we need you to remain calm," Dr. Reeves was saying, but Ward wasn't listening. His eyes were still fixed on Maya's locket, and she could see his lips moving silently, as if he was counting or reciting something. The man in the suit stepped forward. "I'm Damian Pike, Mr. Ward's chief financial officer. I think it would be best if we gave Mr. Ward some privacy to recover. It wasn't a suggestion. Maya felt the shift in the room's energy immediately. The other nurses began filing out, but she hesitated. Ward's eyes met hers again, and in them, she saw something that made her chest tighten. Desperation. As if he was trying to communicate something crucial, but couldn't find the words. "The locket," Pike said quietly, his voice carrying the kind of authority that came from years of making problems disappear. "For security reasons, we'll need you to leave any jewelry outside when treating VIP patients. Hospital policy." Maya's hand closed protectively around the pendant. "This isn't jewelry, it's hospital policy," Pike repeated, and this time there was no mistaking the command in his voice. Dr. Reeves touched her arm gently. "Maya, let's give our patient some space to stabilize." As she was guided toward the door, Maya looked back one final time. Nicholas Ward was still watching her, and his lips moved in what might have been a single word: wait. But the door was already closing. In the hallway, Maya's hands shook as she tried to process what had just happened. The locket felt heavier against her chest, as if it had absorbed the weight of Ward's recognition. She pulled it out, examining it in the harsh hallway lighting. For the first time, she noticed something she'd somehow missed in 6 years of wearing it daily. A tiny engraving along the clasp's edge, so small it was barely visible. Letters and numbers etched in a delicate script. EW 0314. EW Eliza Ward, Nicholas Ward's wife. The wife who had died 6 years ago, according to every news report and obituary Maya had ever read. The same year, Helena Santos had died suddenly in the hospital records room. Maya's world tilted on its axis as she realized that the silver locket she'd worn every day since her mother's funeral might be the key to a secret that could destroy everything. The employee break room at 3 a.m. was Maya's sanctuary, a place where the fluorescent lights couldn't quite reach every corner, where she could sit with her thoughts and a cup of coffee that tasted like it had been brewing since yesterday. But tonight, sanctuary felt more like a trap. She turned the locket over in her palm, studying the tiny engraving with a magnifying glass borrowed from the pharmacy. EWW 0314. The letters were definitely there, delicate but unmistakable. Eliza Ward, March 14th. Maya pulled out her phone and typed quickly. Eliza Ward, death date. The search results were immediate and consistent. Eliza Ward, philanthropist and wife of technology CEO Nicholas Ward, died March 14, 2016, following complications from an autoimmune condition. She was 34 years old. March 14, 2016. The same month Helena Santos had died. Maya's coffee grew cold as she scrolled through article after article. Photos of Eliza at charity galas, standing beside Nicholas with the kind of radiant smile that seemed to light up entire rooms. Photos of the funeral, a private ceremony. No cameras allowed, just a brief statement from the Ward family requesting privacy during their time of grief. No photos of the body, no obituary details beyond the basic facts, no interviews with doctors or friends. Working late again? Maya jumped, nearly spilling her coffee. Marcus Rodriguez, one of the night security guards, stood in the doorway. They'd been friends since her first week at St. Augustine. He was one of the few people who remembered Helena and didn't look uncomfortable when Maya brought her up. "Couldn't sleep," she said, slipping the locket back inside her scrubs. "Marcus, do you remember anything unusual about the night my mom died?" He paused in the doorway, his expression growing thoughtful. Marcus had worked hospital security for 15 years. He saw everything, forgot nothing, and had a radar for institutional cover-ups that had kept him employed and several administrators nervous. "You mean besides the fact that a healthy 48-year-old woman just collapsed in the records room with no witnesses and no clear cause of death?" He moved into the room, closing the door behind him. "Or besides the fact that her access logs showed she'd been pulling files for cases that were supposed to be sealed?" Maya's heart began to pound. "What kind of files?" "High-profile patient records, VIP stuff, the kind of files that have more lawyers attached to them than medical notes." Marcus sat down across from her, his voice dropping to the conspiratorial whisper he used when sharing information that could get them both fired. "Your mom was good people, Maya, honest. But she'd been asking questions about discrepancies in the archive system, files that were supposed to exist but didn't, files that existed but shouldn't have." "Did she ever mention what kind of discrepancies?" patient transfers that didn't match billing records, documentation for treatments that weren't supposed to exist, and he hesitated, glancing toward the closed door. Identity protection protocols for patients who were officially deceased but still generating medical activity in the system. The words hit Maya like a physical blow. Patients who were officially deceased but still receiving treatment under different names, Marcus finished. It's not uncommon for celebrities or politicians who want to keep medical issues private, but the paperwork has to be perfect, or you get audit flags. Your mom was finding audit flags. Maya's mind raced. Helena had been investigating patient records that didn't match. Eliza Ward had died the same month Helena died. Nicholas Ward had recognized her locket immediately, not just as similar to his wife's, but as if it was his wife's. Marcus, hypothetically, if someone wanted to fake a death for medical privacy reasons, how would they do it? His expression grew very serious. Hypothetically, you'd need cooperation from someone in records, someone in billing, someone in legal, and someone high enough up the food chain to make sure no one asked uncomfortable questions. You'd also need a way to maintain the real medical records under a protected identity while generating false death documentation for public consumption. And if someone who worked in records discovered this? Hypothetically, Marcus met her eyes. That someone might find themselves having a very convenient medical emergency before they could report what they'd found. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of implications settling between them. Maya thought about her mother, meticulous, honest Helena, who had spent her life organizing and protecting medical records, who had never missed a day of work until the day she died. "I need to see something," Maya said suddenly. "The charity donation records from 2016, the hospital's public filings. Those would be in the administrative archives, ground floor near the legal department." Marcus checked his watch. "I could probably get you 15 minutes before the morning shift arrives, but Maya, if you're thinking what I think you're thinking, you need to be very careful. People who ask the wrong questions around here have a tendency to find new employment opportunities. Or medical emergencies," Maya added grimly. "Or medical emergeries." 20 minutes later, Maya found herself in the administrative basement, surrounded by filing cabinets and the musty smell of old paper. Marcus kept watch at the door while she searched through boxes of donation records from 2016. The Ward Industries charitable contributions file was thick, dozens of donations throughout the year, each meticulously documented. But as Maya studied the dates, a pattern emerged that made her blood run cold. March 15, 2016, one day after Eliza's official death date, Ward Industries had made the largest charitable contribution in the hospital's history, $5 million, specifically designated for neurological care and research facility upgrades, with particular emphasis on autoimmune condition treatment protocols. The neurological wing, where, according to the attached documentation, they would be treating patients with complex identity protection requirements. Maya's hands shook as she photographed the documents with her phone. The timing wasn't a coincidence. The day after his wife's public funeral, Nicholas Ward had donated $5 million to build a facility that specialized in exactly the kind of care someone with Eliza's condition would need. A facility where someone could receive treatment under a different identity, where someone who was officially dead could continue living. "Maya." Marcus's voice carried a note of urgency. "We need to go, now." She gathered the files quickly, but not before she noticed one final detail that made her stomach drop. At the bottom of the donation agreement, in addition to Nicholas Ward's signature, there were two other names: Damian Pike as CFO approval and Dr. Avery Klein as medical ethics liaison. The same Damian Pike who had demanded she remove her locket just hours ago. As they made their way back through the empty corridors, Maya's mind was spinning. The evidence was circumstantial but compelling. Eliza Ward might be alive, hidden in the hospital's neurological wing under a false identity. Helena had discovered this secret and died for it. And now, 6 years later, Maya was wearing the locket that could prove everything. The locket that Nicholas Ward had recognized immediately. The locket that Damian Pike had tried to confiscate. The locket that might be the only thing standing between truth and the kind of institutional cover-up that had already cost her mother's life. In her pocket, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop digging or join your mother." Maya's hand closed around the locket at her throat. For the first time since Helena's death, she didn't feel afraid. She felt angry. The threat should have been enough to make Maya back down. Instead, it made her realize how close she was getting to something that powerful people desperately wanted to keep buried. She spent the morning researching everything she could find about Eliza Ward's medical history. The public information was frustratingly sparse. Mentions of an autoimmune condition, references to complications, but nothing specific enough to provide real answers. But Maya had resources the public didn't. 6 years of working in a hospital taught you how to read between the lines of medical euphemisms. Autoimmune encephalitis. It had to be. The symptoms matched what little information was available: cognitive issues, memory problems, behavioral changes that could easily be misunderstood as psychiatric conditions. More importantly, it was exactly the kind of diagnosis that would require long-term neurological care and could justify the kind of identity protection protocols Marcus had described. It was also treatable, with the right care and resources, not fatal. Maya's shift started at 6 p.m., but she arrived early to visit the hospital's memorial garden, a small courtyard between the main building and the neurological wing where families often went to process grief and difficult news. She wasn't there to mourn, though. She was there to observe. The neurological wing had its own entrance, its own security desk, its own staff who seemed to operate independently from the rest of the hospital. Maya had never paid much attention to it before, but now she watched the patterns. Visitors were rare. The few people who did come and go used key cards rather than signing in at the public desk. Medical staff moved between the buildings through a covered walkway that would be invisible to anyone not specifically looking for it. It was designed for privacy, complete privacy. Interesting view. Maya spun around to find a woman about her age sitting on a bench she hadn't noticed before. The stranger had short auburn hair and intelligent green eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Her clothing was casual but expensive, the kind of understated elegance that suggested money without flaunting it. I'm sorry? The neurological wing. Most people don't realize it's designed as a completely separate facility, separate electrical grid, separate internet connection, separate everything. The woman stood and extended her hand. I'm Sarah Chen. I used to work there. Maya hesitated before shaking the offered hand. After the threatening text message, she wasn't sure who to trust. Maya Santos. I work in the main hospital. Santos. Sarah's expression shifted slightly. Helena Santos was your mother. It wasn't a question, and the matter-of-fact way Sarah said it made Maya's chest tighten. You knew her. She helped me once, with a records issue that could have cost me my career. Sarah gestured toward the bench. Mind if I sit? I have something I think you should see. Against her better judgment, Maya sat down. Sarah reached into her bag and pulled out a tablet, opening it to display what looked like medical records. But the format was different from the standard hospital system Maya was familiar with. These are from the neurological wing's private database, the one that doesn't interface with the main hospital system. Sarah scrolled through several screens of data. Your mother found discrepancies because she was looking in the wrong database. The treatments were happening, but they were being documented in a completely separate system. Maya leaned closer, studying the records. Patient identification numbers that didn't match the hospital's standard format. Treatment protocols for conditions that suggested long-term care rather than terminal illness. And names. Lots of names that she didn't recognize. How did you get access to this? I was a data analyst for the neurological wing until 6 months ago. I quit when I realized what they were doing. Sarah's voice was tight with suppressed anger. Maya, your mother died because she was asking the right questions, but she was looking in the wrong place. Sarah scrolled to a specific patient record, and Maya's breath caught. The patient ID was listed as EW 2016-314, Eliza Ward 2016, March 14th, the date of her supposed death. But the treatment records continued for years after that date. She's alive, Maya whispered. She's alive, and she's been receiving treatment in the neurological wing for 6 years. Excellent treatment from what I can see. Her condition has been managed successfully. Sarah closed the tablet and looked directly at Maya. But the cost of keeping her alive and hidden has been enormous, not just financially. What do you mean? Insurance fraud? Medicare fraud? Research grant fraud? When you fake someone's death but continue treating them, you have to get creative with funding sources. Ward Industries has been funneling money through fake research programs and charitable donations to cover the real costs. Sarah's expression was grim. But that's not the worst part. Maya felt sick. What's the worst part? Other patients in the neurological wing have died from treatable conditions because resources were being diverted to maintain Eliza's secret identity. People who could have been saved weren't, because the money that should have funded their care was being used to keep a billionaire's wife hidden. The weight of it hit Maya all at once. Her mother hadn't just discovered a case of identity fraud. She'd uncovered a systematic diversion of resources that had cost lives. Helena had died trying to expose something that was actively killing other patients. "Why are you telling me this?" Maya asked. "Because in 6 months of trying to get someone in authority to listen, you're the first person who might actually be able to do something about it." Sarah reached into her bag again and pulled out a small USB drive. "This contains copies of everything I could access before they revoked my credentials. Treatment records, financial transfers, correspondence between Nicholas Ward and the medical team. Everything." Maya took the drive, her hands trembling slightly. "Why don't you take it to the authorities yourself?" "Because I'm a former employee with a grudge and no family connections to give me credibility. You're a current employee whose mother died under suspicious circumstances. You have standing to ask questions I can't ask." Sarah stood to leave, then paused. "Maya, be very careful. The people involved in this have already proven they're willing to kill to keep it secret. Don't trust anyone in administration. Don't trust hospital security beyond your friend Marcus. And whatever you do, don't let them know you have that data until you're ready to use it." As Sarah walked away, Maya looked down at the USB drive in her palm. It was smaller than a thumb drive, innocuous looking, but it contained evidence that could destroy careers, end lives, and potentially solve the mystery of her mother's death. She thought about Helena, honest, meticulous Helena, who had never been able to ignore a discrepancy in the records, no matter how small, who had died alone in the records room, trying to protect information that could save lives. Maya slipped the drive into her pocket next to her phone. The locket at her throat felt heavier than ever, as if it had absorbed the weight of all the secrets she now carried. For the first time in 6 years, she felt like her mother was still with her, guiding her toward the truth Helena had died trying to expose. Tonight, Maya would find out exactly what was hidden in the neurological wing, and tomorrow she would decide what to do about it. Maya's hands were steadier than she'd expected as she slipped Sarah's USB drive into her personal laptop that night. The data filled her screen in neat spreadsheets and scanned documents that painted a picture of deception so sophisticated it took her breath away. Patient EW 2016-314 had received consistent neurological care for 6 years. Monthly brain scans showed steady improvement. Medication regimens had been adjusted and refined. Physical therapy sessions were documented with detailed progress notes. This wasn't the medical record of someone who had died in 2016. This was the record of someone who had been receiving world-class treatment and was recovering. But the financial trail was what made Maya's stomach turn. Research grants for experimental autoimmune treatments that had been approved based on falsified patient data. Insurance claims for deceased patients whose treatment was actually being provided to Eliza. Medicare reimbursements for neurological procedures that were officially being performed on other patients entirely. Millions of dollars. Diverted, stolen, redirected from the hospital's general fund to maintain one person's secret treatment. Maya cross-referenced the dates with patient mortality records from the neurological wing. The correlation was undeniable. As resources were diverted to Eliza's care, other patients' treatment suffered. Delayed surgeries, reduced staffing. Equipment that should have been replaced wasn't. People had died. Her phone rang, making her jump. Unknown number. "Don't answer," she whispered to herself, but curiosity won out. "Maya?" The voice was familiar. Nicholas Ward, but he sounded exhausted, desperate. "I know you have questions about the locket, about your mother. Can you meet me? How did you get this number? Please, 1 hour. The Memorial Garden. I'll answer everything." The line went dead. Maya stared at her phone, her mind racing. It could be a trap. Damien Pike could be using Ward's phone to lure her into the open. But the voice had carried a note of genuine desperation that was hard to fake. She made copies of Sarah's data, storing them in 3 different locations. If something happened to her tonight, At least the evidence would survive. The memorial garden was dark, except for small solar lights along the pathways. Maya arrived 5 minutes early and positioned herself where she could see all the entrances. Her hand stayed on her phone, ready to call Marcus if anything felt wrong. Nicholas Ward appeared exactly on time, alone. He looked like he'd aged 5 years since she'd seen him in the emergency room 12 hours earlier. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his usually perfect hair disheveled. He moved like a man carrying enormous weight. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly, sitting on the bench where Sarah had shown her the medical records. "I know you have no reason to trust me. You're right. I don't." Maya remained standing, ready to run if necessary. "But I want answers. Your mother," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, "was trying to save lives, including my wife's. Your wife is supposed to be dead. My wife wanted to be dead." The words came out like a confession. When Eliza developed autoimmune encephalitis, the symptoms, the cognitive changes, the personality shifts, the memory problems, she begged me to let her disappear. She couldn't bear the thought of becoming a public spectacle, of our private struggle becoming tabloid entertainment. Maya felt a flicker of something, not sympathy exactly, but understanding. "So you faked her death. I hired the best doctors, the most discreet facility. It was supposed to be temporary. A few months of treatment while she recovered, then we'd figure out how to bring her back into the world." His voice cracked. "I never intended for it to become permanent, but it did become permanent, and your CFO started stealing to pay for it." Nicholas's head snapped up. "How do you—" "I know about the diverted funds. I know about the fake research grants. I know about the other patients who died because resources were being redirected to keep your wife's secret." Maya's voice grew stronger with each word. "And I know my mother discovered it and died for it. Maya, I swear to you, I didn't know about Helena until after she was gone. Pike told me there had been a security issue with the records, that an employee had accessed files they shouldn't have, but I thought it was resolved administratively. I didn't know she had died. I didn't know about you." He stood up, moving closer, but stopping when Maya stepped back. "When I saw the locket tonight when you said your mother's name, everything clicked into place. Helena Santos, the records analyst who had been asking questions about discrepancies. Questions that got her killed. Questions that were going to save lives, including Eliza's." Nicholas pulled out his phone and showed Maya a text message thread. "Look at these. From Pike, starting the day after your mother died." Maya read the messages, her anger growing with each line. Pike had been systematically expanding the fraud, using Helena's death as an opportunity to eliminate the oversight she'd been providing. He'd convinced Nicholas that increased security was necessary, that fewer people should have access to sensitive records. "He's been lying to me for 6 years, Nicholas said, about the scope of the financial arrangements, about the other patients, about everything." "Why should I believe you?" Maya asked, but she could hear the doubt in her own voice. "Because your mother saved my wife's life, and I want to finish what Helena started." Nicholas met her eyes directly. "I want to end this. All of it. I want to bring Eliza home, shut down the illegal funding, and make sure the people responsible face consequences, including yourself, including myself." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of 6 years of lies and cover-ups settling between them. Maya thought about Helena, about the patients who had died, about Eliza Ward living in secret while her husband's name appeared on hospital buildings and charity galas. "What do you want from me?" she asked finally. "Help me get to Eliza. Help me get her medical records, her treatment history, everything Pike has been hiding from me. Help me build a case that will put him in prison and make sure this never happens again." "In exchange for what?" "In exchange for the truth about your mother, about the locket, about everything." Nicholas pulled something from his jacket, a small silver key. "This opens Eliza's room in the neurological wing. She's been wearing a locket identical to yours for 6 years, waiting for someone to find her." Maya stared at the key, her heart pounding. "She knows? About the fraud? About my mother? She remembers more than Pike thinks she does, and she's been trying to find a way to come forward without destroying the people she loves in the process." Nicholas held out the key. "Maya, I can't undo what's been done. I can't bring your mother back, and I can't erase the harm that's been caused. But I can make sure it ends now tonight if you'll help me." Maya thought about Sarah Chen, about Marcus, about all the evidence she'd gathered. She thought about Helena, dying alone in the records room with secrets she couldn't share. Most of all, she thought about the weight of the locket around her neck, a locket that belonged to a woman who was supposed to be dead but wasn't, whose story was tangled up with Helena's in ways Maya was only beginning to understand. She took the key. "One condition," she said. "We bring Sarah Chen with us, and Marcus Rodriguez. This doesn't stay secret anymore." Nicholas nodded. "Agreed. Then let's go find your wife." The neurological wing at midnight felt like entering a different world entirely. The corridors were quieter, the lighting softer, the very air seeming to carry the weight of secrets. Maya's heart hammered as she, Nicholas, Sarah, and Marcus made their way through security checkpoints. That Nicholas's keycard opened without question. "Room 314N, Nicholas whispered, checking the numbers on each door they passed. She chose the number, March 14th. Maya's hand closed around her locket, the same date engraved on the clasp, the same date as Eliza's supposed death. The door looked identical to every other patient room door in the wing, but when Nicholas used his key, Maya could see immediately that this wasn't a typical hospital room. It had been decorated to feel like home. Personal photographs on the nightstand, artwork on the walls, a reading chair by the window overlooking the memorial garden. This was someone's living space, not a medical facility. The woman sitting in the chair by the window was unmistakably Eliza Ward, though she looked different from the photos Maya had seen in magazines and news articles. Her dark hair was shorter now, streaked with silver, and her face had the kind of peaceful expression that comes from years of recovery and healing. She was reading by lamplight, wearing comfortable clothes that looked nothing like hospital attire. When the door opened, she looked up without surprise, as if she'd been expecting them. "Nicholas," she said softly, and Maya could hear love and exhaustion in equal measure in her voice. "You brought her." "Eliza." Nicholas moved toward her but stopped when she held up a hand. "Let me see the locket first." Maya stepped forward, pulling the pendant out from under her shirt. Eliza's eyes widened and she reached to her own throat, pulling out an identical locket. The two pieces of jewelry caught the lamplight, silver reflecting silver, like mirrors facing each other. "Helena gave me this one," Eliza said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The night before she died, she said if anything happened to her, someone would come looking for answers, someone wearing its match." Maya's breath caught. "My mother was here? She met you? She saved my life." Eliza stood slowly, moving with the careful grace of someone who had spent years relearning how to inhabit her own body. "I was getting worse. The treatments Pike approved weren't working because he was cutting corners, using cheaper medications to maximize the profit margins on the fraudulent billing. Helena figured out what was happening and found a way to get me the care I actually needed." "How?" Sarah asked, pulling out her tablet to document everything. "She created a secondary patient file, hidden in the system where Pike couldn't find it. She made sure I got the right medications, the right therapy protocols, the right monitoring." Eliza's eyes filled with tears. "I started improving almost immediately, but when Pike realized what was happening, when he found the secondary files, he killed her," Maya said quietly. "He confronted her in the records room, told her to destroy the files and keep quiet. When she refused, when she threatened to expose everything," Eliza's voice broke. "I heard them arguing from my room. I tried to get help, but by the time security arrived, she was gone and Pike was spinning a story about a medical emergency." Marcus stepped forward. "What kind of story?" "Heart attack brought on by stress and overwork. Tragic, but natural." Eliza's voice was bitter. "No investigation, no questions. Just condolences and a memorial service that Pike himself organized." Nicholas sat heavily in the room's other chair, his face gray. 6 years. He's been lying to me for 6 years. "He's been lying to everyone," Sarah said, scrolling through data on her tablet. "Nicholas, the financial fraud extends way beyond Eliza's care. He's been using the hospital's neurological wing as a private profit center. Fake patients, inflated billing, diverted research funds." Helena stumbled onto the tip of an iceberg. Maya looked around the room. Comfortable, homey, but still a prison. "Eliza, why didn't you try to expose this yourself? Why did you stay hidden?" "Because Pike convinced me that coming forward would destroy not just Nicholas, but the entire hospital. That the fraud investigation would shut down programs that were saving other people's lives. That the scandal would bankrupt Ward Industries and eliminate all the charitable giving that funds hospitals like this one." Eliza touched her locket. I've been trapped here for 6 years, too afraid to leave but too guilty to stay. And Pike has been getting richer, Maya said, anger building in her chest. While you've been trapped and my mother is dead. Maya, Eliza said softly, Helena left something for you. She said that someday someone would come looking for the truth, and when they did, they would need proof that couldn't be destroyed or discredited. Eliza moved to her dresser and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside, Maya could see USB drives, printed documents, and what looked like a voice recorder. She documented everything. Every conversation with Pike, every piece of evidence she found, every detail about the fraud. She hid copies in places Pike would never think to look. Eliza handed Maya the box. She said if anything happened to her, this would be your inheritance. Maya opened the voice recorder and pressed play. Helena's voice filled the room, clear and determined. If you're hearing this, it means I didn't make it out of here alive. My name is Helena Santos, and I've discovered evidence of systematic fraud at St. Augustine Medical Center that has resulted in patient deaths and the theft of millions in healthcare funds. The evidence is documented in the files contained with this recording. Maya, if this reaches you, know that I died trying to save lives, including the life of a woman who was supposed to be dead but isn't. The locket will guide you to the truth. Trust Nicholas Ward, but trust no one else in administration. The fraud goes deeper than anyone realizes, and the people responsible will kill to keep it secret. I love you, Micha. Finish what I started. The recording ended, leaving the room in profound silence. Maya clutched the box to her chest, tears streaming down her face. 6 years of questions had just been answered in her mother's own voice. She knew, Maya whispered. She knew they were going to kill her. Nicholas stood up, his hands clenched into fists. Pike is going to pay for this tonight. No, Sarah said firmly. Tonight, we gather all the evidence and make sure it gets to the right authorities. If you confront Pike now, he'll destroy what he can and disappear. We need to be smart about this. Marcus nodded. Sarah's right, but we also can't let this wait. Every day Pike stays in control is another day he can hurt people. Maya looked around the room, at Eliza, who had been hidden away for 6 years, at Nicholas, who was finally understanding the scope of the lies he'd been told, at Sarah and Marcus, who were risking their careers to help expose the truth, at the box of evidence that represented her mother's sacrifice. For the first time since Helena's death, Maya felt like she had a purpose that went beyond grief. Tomorrow is the hospital's annual board meeting, she said slowly. All the major donors, department heads, and administrators will be there, including Pike. What are you thinking? Nicholas asked. Maya touched her locket one final time, feeling its weight against her chest. I'm thinking it's time to bring my mother's story to the people who need to hear it most. And Eliza? Sarah asked. Eliza smiled for the first time since they'd entered the room. I've been hiding for 6 years. I think it's time I came back to life. Outside the window, dawn was beginning to break over Seattle, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The memorial garden below looked peaceful in the early light, but Maya knew that by tomorrow night, everything would be different. Helena Santos had died trying to expose the truth. Tomorrow, Maya would finish what her mother had started. The silver locket caught the morning light as she made her decision. It was time for secrets to end and justice to begin. The next 18 hours passed in a blur of careful coordination and nervous energy. Maya had called in sick for her shift, the first time in 6 years, while she, Nicholas, Sarah, and Marcus worked to prepare for what would either be the most important presentation of their lives or the end of all their careers. Sarah had spent the night organizing Helena's evidence into a comprehensive digital presentation. Financial records, patient files, recorded conversations, and photographic evidence were arranged in a timeline that told the complete story of Pike's fraud and Helena's murder. The beauty of your mother's documentation, Sarah explained as they worked in Nicholas's private office, is that she didn't just collect evidence, she created a narrative. She knew that raw data wouldn't be enough to convince people who had a financial interest in maintaining the status quo. Maya watched the presentation take shape on Sarah's laptop screen. Helena's voice narrated key sections, her recorded observations providing context for each piece of evidence. It was like watching her mother solve the case from beyond the grave. Nicholas had been making phone calls all morning, carefully reaching out to board members who weren't financially connected to Pike's operations. The hospital's board included several independent doctors, community leaders, and philanthropists who had genuine concerns about patient care and institutional integrity. Dr. Margaret Chen will be there, Nicholas reported, hanging up from his latest call. Sarah, is she related to you? My aunt. She's been suspicious of the neurological wing's financial structure for years, but never had evidence to support an investigation. Sarah smiled grimly. She's going to be very interested in what we have to show her. Marcus had been working his security contacts to ensure they would have uninterrupted access to the boardroom's presentation equipment. I've also arranged for Seattle PD detectives to be present, off-site, but ready to respond if we need them, he reported. My cousin Tony is a detective in financial crimes. When I showed him some of Helena's evidence, he confirmed they've been looking for a way to investigate irregular billing practices at major medical facilities. Maya sat quietly through most of the preparation, holding the wooden box that contained her mother's final gift. The weight of it in her lap felt like carrying Helena's entire life's work. Everything she had discovered, everything she had died trying to protect, was contained in this small collection of drives and documents. Maya, Nicholas said gently, are you ready for this? Once we start the presentation, there's no going back. Pike will fight back with everything he has. What's he going to do? Maya asked. Kill me in front of the entire hospital board? He might try to have you arrested for theft of confidential records. He might claim you're emotionally unstable and creating conspiracy theories about your mother's death. He might argue that you've manipulated me into supporting false allegations. Nicholas's voice was serious. Maya, I want you to understand, exposing this fraud could destroy my company, end my marriage with Eliza and send me to prison, but I'm willing to face those consequences because it's the right thing to do. Maya looked around the room at the three people who had risked everything to help her find the truth. Sarah had lost her job, investigating the neurological wing. Marcus was potentially ending his career by providing unauthorized access to hospital records. Nicholas was preparing to confess to fraud that could cost him billions. My mother died alone in a records room, trying to save people she never met, Maya said quietly. The least I can do is tell her story in front of people who have the power to make sure it never happens again. As afternoon approached, Maya made one final preparation. She opened Helena's locket and removed a small piece of paper she'd noticed earlier, but hadn't examined closely. Unfolded, it revealed a handwritten note in her mother's careful script. Maya, if you're reading this, it means the truth has found its way to you. I was never afraid of dying for what was right, but I was afraid of leaving you alone with unanswered questions. The locket was Eliza's, given to me the night she begged me to help her find a way home. I had it copied so that someday, when justice was possible, you would have the key to unlock everything. Wear it with pride, Mija. You are my greatest accomplishment, and now you will be your own. Mama tears blurred Maya's vision as she refolded the note. Helena had known. She had planned for this moment, had prepared Maya to carry forward the fight for truth and justice. At 4 p.m., they made their final preparations. Eliza had chosen to stay in her room until after the board meeting. Her sudden reappearance would be shocking enough, without the added stress of appearing before a room full of strangers who believed she was dead. Remember, Sarah said as they gathered their materials, we present the evidence, let it speak for itself, and stay calm no matter how Pike reacts. Helena's documentation is ironclad. The financial records are undeniable. We have everything we need. Maya took a deep breath and touched her locket. For 6 years, it had been a reminder of loss. Tonight, it would become a symbol of justice. The St. Augustine Medical Center boardroom was on the top floor of the administrative building, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of Seattle. Maya had never been in the room before, but as she looked around at the polished conference table and expensive artwork, she understood why Helena had felt so intimidated by the institutional power she was trying to challenge. Tonight, that same institutional power would hear Helena's voice and finally understand what she had died trying to tell them. As board members began arriving for the 6 p.m. meeting, Maya saw Damian Pike enter the room with his usual confident stride. He looked like a man who had never doubted his ability to control any situation. That was about to change. The boardroom filled with the subdued conversations of Seattle's medical and philanthropic elite. Maya recognized several faces from hospital fundraising events. Dr. Margaret Chen, the respected cardiologist, Robert Harrison, whose family foundation funded the children's wing, Elena Vasquez, the city councilwoman who served as community liaison, These were people who genuinely cared about healthcare and patient welfare, people who would be horrified to learn what had been happening in their hospital. Damien Pike took his usual seat at Nicholas's right hand, reviewing documents with the casual confidence of someone who had been successfully deceiving these same people for years. He glanced once at Maya, sitting in the back row with Sarah and Marcus, but showed no sign of concern. That was his first mistake. Dr. Chen called the meeting to order at exactly 6 p.m. We have several items on tonight's agenda, but first Nicholas Ward has requested time to address some concerns about hospital operations. Nicholas stood slowly, and Maya could see the weight of what they were about to do in his posture. Thank you, Margaret. What I'm about to share with you will be difficult to hear, but it's information that has been kept from this board for 6 years, and people have died because of our ignorance. Pike's head snapped up. Nicholas, if this is about operational disagreements, perhaps we should discuss them privately first. No, Damien. We're past private discussions. Nicholas activated the room's presentation system, and Sarah's carefully organized evidence appeared on the main screen. 6 years ago, this board approved a $5 million donation to expand our neurological facilities. What you weren't told was that the expansion was designed to hide systematic fraud that has cost lives and stolen millions from healthcare programs. The room went completely quiet. Maya could see board members leaning forward, their attention completely focused on Nicholas. The fraud began with a single case, my wife Eliza, who developed autoimmune encephalitis in early 2016. Instead of treating her condition openly, I was convinced to fake her death and hide her in a private facility within the hospital. What I didn't know was that my CFO, Damien Pike, saw this as an opportunity to create an entire system of financial fraud. Pike stood up abruptly. Nicholas, you're obviously under tremendous stress. This is not the appropriate forum for... Sit down, Damien. Nicholas's voice carried a command that Maya had never heard before. You'll have your chance to respond. The presentation continued with Helena's financial analysis, fake research grants, diverted insurance payments, fraudulent billing for deceased patients. The numbers were staggering, over $15 million stolen over 6 years. But the financial fraud was just the beginning, Nicholas continued. Resources that should have gone to patient care were diverted to maintain secrecy. Equipment purchases were delayed. Staffing was reduced. Treatment protocols were compromised. Sarah had included a slide showing patient outcomes in the neurological wing over the past 6 years. Mortality rates that should have been declining had remained static. Recovery times had increased. Success rates for treatable conditions had dropped significantly. People died, Nicholas said quietly, because money that should have saved their lives was being stolen. Dr. Chen's voice was sharp with anger. Nicholas, these are incredibly serious allegations. What evidence do you have? I have the evidence gathered by Helena Santos, the hospital's former records analyst who discovered this fraud in 2016. Nicholas gestured toward Maya. Helena Santos died trying to expose this corruption. Her daughter Maya is here tonight to present her mother's findings. All eyes turned to Maya as she stood up, her legs trembling slightly. For a moment, she felt like that scared young woman who had gotten the call about her mother's sudden death 6 years ago. Then she touched the locket at her throat and heard Helena's voice in her memory. Finish what I started. My name is Maya Santos, she said, her voice stronger than she'd expected. I'm a cardiac nurse here at St. Augustine, and Helena Santos was my mother. Pike was on his feet again. This is outrageous. You can't let a grieving daughter turn a board meeting into a personal vendetta based on conspiracy theories. Mr. Pike, Dr. Chen said coldly, you'll have your opportunity to respond to these allegations. Right now I want to hear what Ms. Santos has to say. Maya pulled out Helena's voice recorder, her hands steady now. My mother documented everything she discovered before she died. She knew the truth was dangerous, so she made sure it would survive even if she didn't. She pressed play, and Helena's voice filled the boardroom. My name is Helena Santos, and I've discovered evidence of systematic fraud at St. Augustine Medical Center that has resulted in patient deaths and the theft of millions in healthcare funds. The room was absolutely silent as Helena's recording played. Her mother's voice, clear and determined, laid out the evidence piece by piece. Financial discrepancies, patient records that didn't match billing, resources diverted from critical care to maintain fraudulent operations. Maya watched Pike's face as the recording continued. She saw the moment he realized that Helena had documented not just the fraud, but his personal involvement in covering it up. His confident expression cracked, replaced by something that looked like panic. When Helena's voice described her final confrontation with Pike, when she detailed his threats and his admission that he would do whatever necessary to protect the operation, Pike's face went completely white. "This is fabricated," he said desperately. A dying woman's delusions turned into a conspiracy theory by her unstable daughter. "Damien," Nicholas said quietly, "the recording includes your voice." Maya pressed play on the second recorder, the one Helena had hidden in her pocket during her final meeting with Pike. Pike's voice filled the room, cold and threatening. "Helena, you need to understand the position you're putting everyone in. This hospital depends on discretionary funding arrangements that you couldn't possibly understand. If you force us to restructure those arrangements, people will lose their jobs, programs will be cut. Are you prepared to have that on your conscience?" Helena's voice responded, "I'm prepared to make sure patients get the care they're paying for." Pike's voice again, "Then you're prepared to face the consequences of that decision." The recording ended. Pike stood frozen, staring at the device in Maya's hand, as if it were a weapon pointed at his chest. "Doctor." Chen's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Mr. Pike, do you have anything to say in response to these allegations?" For the first time in 6 years, Damien Pike had nothing to say. The silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds before Pike seemed to find his voice again. "These recordings could easily be fabricated. Digital evidence can be manipulated. This is clearly an elaborate attempt to..." "To what?" Dr. Chen interrupted. "To expose fraud? To seek justice for her mother's death? To extort money from the hospital and from Nicholas," Pike said desperately. "This woman has been obsessed with conspiracy theories about her mother's death for years. She's manipulated Nicholas during a vulnerable moment." "Damien." Nicholas's voice was ice cold. "Stop lying." Maya stepped forward, pulling out the wooden box that contained the rest of Helena's evidence. "My mother didn't just record conversations. She documented everything. She began placing items on the conference table. USB drives, printed financial records, photographs of forged documents, copies of emails between Pike and various administrators. Each piece of evidence landed with the weight of irrefutable truth. Bank records showing transfers from research accounts to private accounts controlled by Mr. Pike," Maya said, her confidence growing with each revelation. "Patient files showing treatments billed to insurance for patients who had been officially deceased for months. Email correspondence between Pike and medical suppliers arranging for equipment purchases that never happened, with the funds diverted to maintain the fraudulent operations." Sarah stood up, adding her own documentation to the growing pile of evidence. "I was a data analyst in the neurological wing until 6 months ago. I can confirm that these records are authentic. I can also provide additional documentation showing how the fraud expanded after Helena Santos's death." Elena Vasquez, the city councilwoman, picked up one of the financial reports. "These numbers, if this is accurate, we're looking at over $15 million in fraudulent billing. That's not just hospital fraud, that's healthcare fraud that affects federal programs. Which is why Detective Tony Rodriguez of Seattle PD Financial Crimes Unit is waiting outside," Marcus said, speaking for the first time. "Maya asked me to contact law enforcement before tonight's meeting. They're ready to begin a formal investigation based on this evidence." Pike's facade finally cracked completely. "You have no idea what you're doing," he said, his voice shaking with rage. "Nicholas, if this comes out, it won't just destroy me. It will destroy you, your company, this hospital. Everyone sitting at this table will be affected when the scandal breaks." "That's a risk we'll have to take," Nicholas replied. "The alternative is allowing the fraud to continue, and allowing more people to die while resources are stolen from patient care," Maya added. Dr. Chen had been examining the evidence while Pike spoke. Now she looked up, her expression grim. "Mr. Pike, I've reviewed enough of this documentation to see a clear pattern of fraudulent activity. As chairman of this board, I'm immediately suspending you from all hospital operations pending a full investigation." "You can't do that. I have contracts, employment agreements, which become void in cases of criminal fraud," Robert Harrison said, looking up from his own examination of the financial records. "Damien, if even half of this is true, you're facing federal charges." Pike looked around the room, seeing his support evaporating in real time. Board members who had trusted him for years were now looking at him with disgust and anger. Finally, his gaze settled on Maya, and she saw something in his eyes that made her understand why Helena had been afraid in her final days. "You have no idea what you've started," he said quietly. "Your mother thought she was saving lives. Instead, she's destroyed them. When this hospital loses its funding, when programs shut down, when people lose their jobs, that will be Helena Santos's legacy." Maya felt anger rise in her chest. Not the cold, analytical anger she'd been carrying for 6 years, but something hot and immediate. "My mother's legacy is truth. Something you clearly don't understand. Truth." Pike laughed bitterly. "The truth is that complex medical facilities require complex financial arrangements. The truth is that sometimes rules need to be bent to provide the best care. The truth is that your mother was a small-minded bureaucrat who couldn't see the bigger picture. The bigger picture that included my mother's murder." Maya's voice rose. "Your mother had a heart attack, brought on by stress and her own poor health choices. While being threatened by you in the records room, while being offered a promotion and a salary increase to stop interfering with operations, she didn't understand. The lie was so blatant, so obviously false in the face of Helena's recorded evidence, that Maya almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "Mr. Pike," Dr. Chen said, "I think it would be best if you left the hospital immediately. Security will escort you out, and you should contact your attorney." Pike gathered his materials with shaking hands, but before leaving he turned back to Maya one final time. "This isn't over. When the federal investigation starts, when the media gets involved, when your precious hospital's reputation is destroyed, remember that you chose this. You chose to put your personal grievances above the welfare of everyone who depends on this institution." "No," Maya said quietly. "I chose to finish what my mother started. I chose truth over convenience." As Pike was escorted from the room by hospital security, Maya felt a weight she'd been carrying for 6 years finally begin to lift. Helena's voice, Helena's evidence, Helena's courage had finally been heard by people who had the power to act. But she knew Pike was right about one thing. This was just the beginning. The real work of justice was just starting. 3 hours later, the boardroom had been transformed into what looked like a crime scene investigation. Detective Tony Rodriguez and 2 federal agents had taken over the conference table, cataloging evidence, while board members provided statements about Pike's activities over the past 6 years. Maya sat in the corner, emotionally drained but oddly at peace. Watching Helena's carefully gathered evidence being treated with the respect and attention it deserved felt like finally being able to properly honor her mother's sacrifice. Nicholas had been questioned for over an hour about his role in the initial fraud. To his credit, he answered every question honestly, even when the answers could potentially incriminate him. "I made the decision to fake my wife's death for what I believed were compassionate reasons," he told the agents. "I take full responsibility for creating the situation that Pike was able to exploit." "Mr. Ward," Detective Rodriguez said, "based on the evidence we've reviewed, it appears you were also a victim of Pike's fraud. The financial arrangements he made went far beyond what you authorized, and he actively concealed the extent of his activities from you. That doesn't absolve me of responsibility for the initial decision. No, but it does mean you're more likely to be considered a witness than a defendant in the criminal case." Dr. Chen had been coordinating with hospital administration to ensure continuity of operations while the investigation proceeded. "We'll need to conduct a complete audit of all financial activities for the past 6 years, she announced. "Every grant, every donation, every billing record. This institution's integrity has been compromised, and we need to rebuild trust with our patients and the community." As the formal proceedings wound down, Maya found herself standing at the boardroom windows, looking out over the city where her mother had lived and died. Seattle spread out below, lights beginning to twinkle in the evening darkness. "Maya?" Nicholas joined her at the window. "I owe you an apology that I'll never be able to adequately express." "You don't owe me an apology. You were trying to protect your wife. I owe you an apology because my decisions created the situation that cost your mother her life. If I had been braver 6 years ago, if I had been willing to face the public scrutiny of Eliza's illness instead of hiding it, none of this would have happened." Maya considered this. Maybe. Or maybe Pike would have found some other way to steal money and hurt people. We'll never know what might have been different, but we know what we can do now, which is make sure it never happens again. Make sure the people who were hurt get justice. Make sure my mother's work wasn't wasted. Nicholas nodded slowly. Maya, I want to offer you something, and I want you to think carefully before you respond. I'd like to create a position for you here at the hospital, Director of Patient Advocacy and Institutional Integrity. Your job would be to make sure that what happened to Helena never happens to another healthcare worker who discovers wrongdoing. Maya turned to look at him directly. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you a platform, a way to turn your mother's legacy into systemic change. You'd have direct access to the board, an independent budget, and the authority to investigate any concerns about patient care or financial irregularities. The offer was tempting, but Maya had learned to be suspicious of offers that seemed too good to be true. What's the catch? No catch, but it would mean staying connected to this place, to the memories of what happened here. It would mean making your personal tragedy into professional purpose. That's not an easy thing to do. Maya thought about Helena, about the 6 years of questions and grief, and searching for answers that had led to this moment. I'll need to think about it. Of course, take all the time you need. The next morning, Maya stood outside room 314N in the neurological wing, holding a small bundle of personal items that Eliza had asked her to bring from her original home. After 6 years of hiding, Eliza Ward was finally ready to come back to the world. When Maya entered the room, she found Eliza packing the few belongings she'd accumulated during her years in hiding. She looked different than she had the night before, stronger, more resolved. "How are you feeling?" Maya asked. "Terrified," Eliza admitted. "I've been hidden away for so long that I'm not sure I remember how to be a person in the real world, but also relieved. The secret was killing Nicholas slowly, and it killed your mother quickly. It's time for truth. Are you ready for the media attention? The questions? I'm ready to tell my story honestly. About the illness, about the decision to hide, about what it cost." Eliza touched her locket, the twin to Maya's. "Your mother gave me hope during the darkest period of my life. She made me believe that healing was possible, that I could come back from what felt like death. I owe it to her memory to live openly and honestly." Maya helped Eliza gather her final items. As they prepared to leave the room that had been both sanctuary and prison, Eliza paused at the window overlooking the memorial garden. "Maya, I want you to know that Helena talked about you constantly. She was so proud of you, so determined that you would have a life free from the secrets and lies that had trapped both of us. She died believing that someday you would find the truth and use it to help other people. I hope I can live up to what she believed about me. You already have." Together, they walked out of the neurological wing and into the main hospital, where Eliza Ward would officially return to life, and Maya Santos would begin the work of turning her mother's sacrifice into lasting change. The silver lockets caught the morning light as they walked, 2 pieces of jewelry that had become symbols of truth, justice, and the power of one person's courage to change everything. 6 months later, Maya stood in the same memorial garden where she had first met Sarah Chen, but everything had changed. The garden now featured a small plaque dedicated to Helena Santos and other healthcare workers who had died in service of truth and patient care. The federal investigation had been swift and thorough. Pike was facing 15 years in federal prison for healthcare fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy. 3 other administrators who had participated in the cover-up were also facing criminal charges. The hospital had agreed to pay over $20 million in fines and restitution to affected programs. But the most important changes weren't financial. Maya had accepted Nicholas's offer to become Director of Patient Advocacy and Institutional Integrity, and she'd used her position to implement the kind of systematic reforms Helena would have wanted. Anonymous reporting systems for healthcare workers who discovered irregularities, independent oversight of financial arrangements between hospitals and private donors, mandatory transparency in research funding and patient care resource allocation. She had also worked with Detective Rodriguez to establish a task force investigating similar fraud at other medical facilities across the region. Helena's evidence had become the blueprint for identifying institutional corruption throughout the healthcare system. Maya, Sarah appeared beside her, holding 2 cups of coffee from the hospital cafeteria. Ready for the big day? Today was the official opening of the Helena Santos Center for Healthcare Integrity, a research and advocacy organization funded by Ward Industries and housed within St. Augustine Medical Center. It would train healthcare workers to identify and report institutional fraud, provide legal support for whistleblowers, and conduct ongoing research into healthcare corruption. "I think Mom would have liked it," Maya said, accepting the coffee gratefully. She would have been amazed by it. Helena thought she was just doing her job, protecting patient records and making sure the numbers added up. She never imagined that her work would lead to systemic reform across the entire healthcare system. They walked toward the main building, where a small crowd had gathered for the dedication ceremony. Maya spotted familiar faces: Dr. Chen, who had become the hospital's new chief medical officer; Marcus, who had been promoted to head of security and integrity oversight; Detective Rodriguez, who had become something of a national expert on healthcare fraud investigation. Nicholas and Eliza were there too, standing together in public for the first time since her official return from the dead. The media attention had been intense initially, but they had handled it with grace and honesty. Eliza's story had become a powerful advocate for mental health awareness and the dangers of stigmatizing neurological conditions. "Maya," Eliza approached her as the ceremony began. "I wanted to thank you again, not just for exposing the truth, but for giving me the courage to live openly again. You don't need to thank me. You survived 6 years of imprisonment and came out stronger. I survived because your mother made sure I got the care I needed, even when it put her own life at risk. And I'm thriving now because you finished what she started." Eliza pulled out her locket, polished, now no longer hidden beneath clothes. "Helena gave this to me as a symbol of hope. Now I wear it as a symbol of responsibility." As the dedication ceremony began, Maya found herself thinking about the path that had led her here. 6 years ago, she had been a grieving daughter with unanswered questions, wearing a locket she didn't fully understand. Today, she was a healthcare advocate with the power to implement systemic change, wearing the same locket as a symbol of justice achieved. Dr. Chen stepped up to the podium to begin the ceremony. "We gather today to honor the memory of Helena Santos and to dedicate ourselves to the principles she died defending: truth, transparency, and the unwavering commitment to patient care above all other considerations." As the ceremony continued, Maya noticed a young woman in scrubs standing at the back of the crowd, listening intently. The woman looked familiar. There was something about her posture, her intense attention to the speakers, that reminded Maya of herself 6 years ago. During the reception afterward, the young woman approached Maya hesitantly. "Ms. Santos, I'm Jennifer Martinez. I work in billing for the children's wing." "Nice to meet you, Jennifer. I think there might be some irregularities in the billing system for pediatric cancer treatments. Nothing as large as what Mr. Pike was doing, but something that doesn't feel right." Jennifer's hands were trembling slightly. "I wasn't sure who to talk to, but after hearing about what your mother did..." Maya felt a familiar recognition, the same instinct that had driven Helena to investigate discrepancies, the same commitment to truth that had cost her mother her life, but had ultimately led to justice. "Jennifer, would you like to come to my office tomorrow? We can go through what you found together. You won't think I'm paranoid or overreacting." Maya touched the silver locket at her throat, feeling its familiar weight. "I think you're doing exactly what healthcare workers should do when something doesn't feel right. You're asking questions." As the sun set over Seattle, Maya realized that Helena's legacy wasn't just about exposing one case of fraud or seeking justice for one woman's death. It was about creating a culture where truth was valued over convenience, where patient care was protected above profit, where healthcare workers felt empowered to ask difficult questions and demand honest answers. The silver locket caught the evening light as Maya walked back toward the hospital, ready to continue the work her mother had started. Helena Santos had died believing that truth would eventually triumph over deception. 6 years later, her daughter was proving her right, one case at a time. In her office, Maya opened her computer and began typing the first report in what would become a comprehensive investigation of pediatric billing irregularities. At the top of the document, she wrote, "Investigation initiated by Jennifer Martinez, Healthcare Integrity Specialist. Evidence reviewed by Maya Santos, Director of Patient Advocacy." Helena's voice seemed to whisper in the quiet office. "Finish what I started." "Already on it, Mom," Maya said quietly, and continued typing. The silver locket rested against her chest, no longer a reminder of loss, but a symbol of hope, justice, and the power of ordinary people to create extraordinary change. Truth has a way of surfacing, even when powerful people try to bury it. Helena Santos died protecting patients she never met, but her courage lives on through her daughter and through every healthcare worker who chooses truth over convenience. If this story moved you, share it with someone who believes in the power of ordinary people to create extraordinary change. Because sometimes the most important battles for justice begin with a single person asking the right questions. What questions are you brave enough to ask?